I'll start off by asking you to introduce yourself.
Sure, Eleanor. So I'm Alex Carter. I am by day a professor at Columbia Law School. I teach negotiation. And in my spare time, I'm also the author of Ask for More, 10 Questions to Negotiate Anything, a book about negotiation. Came out 2020 from Simon & Schuster. And I'm the founder of Ask for More Enterprises, a large training and consulting business where we work with Fortune 500 companies, the UN, and others on how to make better deals and do it in a better way.
So you've got a few things going on.
I should also mention I'm a wife and a mom of one girl aged 11, Eleanor. So life is really full.
So I would love to start with kind of the 3-minute backstory on how you became a top-ranked law prof at Columbia. So let's just kind of get to that part of the story. Give us a bit of backstory there.
Sure. So the backstory is, Eleanor, that I had zero idea what I wanted to do with my life until my last year of Columbia Law School. So I'm about $100,000 deep into this education already. And all of a sudden, I take the class that changes my life. It's called the Mediation Clinic. And a friend of mine recommended it to me, said, hey, I just took this, but it requires a lot of talking. I think you'd be great at it. So with that shade, I entered the class, and it was teaching people how to negotiate and settle really complex disputes. And the first time I did that, Eleanor, I thought, this is it. I've got to figure out a way to do this. But you can't do that out of law school. You can't become a mediation professor. So I pushed the default button. I went to a really large law firm. And then one day I got a call. And it was my mentor and professor saying, I'm retiring, please apply. And when I tell you, Eleanor, you've heard all those stories about women don't apply unless they meet 100% of the criteria. That almost was me. I waited until the very last moment to apply because I knew this was my dream job. I knew I'd be crushed if I didn't get it. And I looked at the qualifications and thought, I haven't really been teaching before, and they've asked for experience. And my husband sat down next to me and said, we're doing this now. And I wrote the application, and Eleanor, I have been in this job now nearly 14 years. I won the overall teaching award at Columbia University a couple of years ago. And I did that as somebody who felt she was, quote unquote, underqualified for the job. So the answer is, how did I get here today? I paid attention to my joy, and then I went ahead and applied. That's the story.
Now, you have a really successful career that you love at Columbia Law School, and you decide to write a book. So if you can walk us through that backstory, I want to hear it.
Yes. So I'm a junior professor at Columbia Law School, and I start to get calls, Eleanor, one by one. First was a couple of law firms, and they must have been going through the directory of people who teach negotiation and said, oh, there's a woman, let's call her. And initially you could tell that a few of the places that called me had all the guys in before, because my field is very male dominated. It's a lot of men with law enforcement background, all with about 20 years on me. And so one by one, I could see companies, whether it was because I was a woman, I was at Columbia Law School, starting to call me to come in and train them in negotiation. And I would do that. And at the end of my talks, people would come up to me and say, that was life-changing. Where do I go to read more about your work? And I realized, Eleanor, that over and over again, I had an approach that worked, but it wasn't out there. And so I had to recommend books, the same 5 or so books that were all written by the same men. And one day, I forget what day it was, I just said to myself, that's it. I'm not doing another speaking engagement where I recommend somebody else's work. I'm going to get out there and offer what I have. And so I took 6 months to write a book proposal that I had no idea would ever be bought. I just took a massive bet on myself, and I spent all of that time, all of my spare time, for 6 months. And then I took a major shot I sent my book proposal cold to a few top agents. And when I tell you the biggest, baddest woman on my list, my Powerball agent, called me back the next business day and said, let's do this. We're going to sell your book. And that's how it happened.
A couple of probing questions here. So probing question number one, you are a mom, a wife, a full-time law professor, award-winning law professor, which means you're putting in the time, right? You're not phoning it in. So when you talk about taking that 6 months to craft the book proposal, super detailed question here, but can you share a little inside baseball of how you carved out the time to do that? What did that look like? Because sometimes these big, important projects that set us up for success don't get done. So what did that look like for you?
I'll tell you why I'm here today, Eleanor. I'm here today as an author for two reasons. One is I finally took the sabbatical that I was supposed to take. Do you know at Columbia Law School, you get a sabbatical every 7 years? And do you know how long I waited to take mine? More than 10. Did that serve anybody, Eleanor? No, it did not. I was running myself into the ground. I just thought, I don't have time to rest. Does this sound familiar? I have so many projects. And yet, so I finally took the sabbatical in the spring of 18. I still would not be sitting here today, Eleanor, if not for one other thing. And the one other thing is I had to have major reconstructive foot surgery that left me confined to a bed with my leg in the air, non-weight bearing for more than 6 weeks. Because I tell you, had I not had to have surgery, and by the way, everyone on this podcast, I am not advocating that the only way you slow down is that your work basically forces you to rest and you have to have surgery to confine you in one place. I am saying that this was the massive, knock on the head that I needed to give my brain time and space to rest. I was forced to rest. For 6 weeks, I did nothing but watch the Olympics, stare at the ceiling, and just rest. And Eleanor, at the end of that 6 weeks, I sat up in bed, grabbed my laptop and said, I have it. And I banged out the outline of what would be Ask for More in 45 minutes. This was the book that I had been writing in my head for years. And what did it need? It needed rest. It needed time to think. It needed for me to clear my brain space from the tyranny of the email and the texts and the everyday so that my mind could do what it needed to do. And because of that, I'm here today as a published author. Once I had the idea, I told everybody I knew in my close circle that I was writing a book, and I did that so that I could not back out because I knew that everywhere I went, Eleanor would be saying, Alex, how's the book going? My friend Amy would call me and say, I heard you're writing a book. And the more I did it, the more I believed it until the day I got that call from the agent. And I thought, oh my goodness, I willed this into being. And I had a new foot by that point as well. So a bonus.
New book, new foot, new lease on life. What's so interesting about what you've just shared is this idea that sometimes it's not even just about asking for more. Sometimes it's about asking for what we're already owed, like a sabbatical, 3 years overdue.
Yes. I sometimes think, what badge was I trying to earn, Eleanor? What cape was I trying to put on? What superhero was I cosplaying there, right, when I was delaying my sabbatical for so long? That rest is the minimum. I have to tell you, in the last couple of years, what I've learned is the more I level up my dreams, the more I level up my business and my vision and the people around me, the more that I have to level up my rest and support. It's not just about how many appointments I put in a day. It's also about giving myself time to make bigger decisions, to really marinate on those and to make sure I'm speaking from a place of clarity. It's about, if I'm serving bigger clients, I need more time to rest so that I can be at 110% of my fullest energy. So I have to tell you, my next sabbatical, believe it or not, because I waited so long, is coming up next year, and I'm taking it immediately. Because now I know that when I give myself intentional rest, there are huge moves that come out of that for me in my business and in my health, my mental, my emotional, my spiritual health as well.
When we talk about the work that you do as a negotiation trainer and the methodology that you lay out and ask for more, we're often thinking about it in terms of negotiating for money, or
Yes.
that's kind of where a lot of people go first off the bat. Now, I want to ask you about this big level up that's happened. The fact that you're running a really successful business, you are a Wall Street Journal bestselling author and a Columbia Law professor. So let's talk about what asking for more looks like in the context of managing increasing levels of success and responsibility.
Absolutely. So there were three things beyond money that I negotiated for. And Eleanor, my theme for last year, in fact, was more than money. Money gets you to the starting line. Money gets you to day one of that client contract, day one of your corporate job. But especially as women, especially as female founders and professionals out there who are changing the world, there are everyday negotiations that aren't about money at all that are what move the needle for us. So the three things that I negotiated for last year were boundaries, space, and support. So I'll take each one of those in turn. Number one, boundaries. Boundaries are so critically important when you are leveling up, when you are a female founder who is, like your audience, looking to maximize your impact and also to maximize wealth and power for your family. But when you are leveling up like that, every yes you say, every boundary you allow people to push is then a powerful no that you're saying to something else. It's no to intentional time with my daughter or husband. That's no to sleep. That's no to my own sense of value and well-being. And so part of what I learned how to do last year was to say no. And a lot of times I'm saying no without using the word no. So people write to me on LinkedIn and ask me for negotiation advice in my DMs. And I can see it's sounding familiar. And I write back and say, listen, I'm a perfectionist. I don't give advice over LinkedIn because it's not going to be my best for you. So I'm going to invite you to book a call. Here are the fees for how I work with people. And I would love for my next person to be you. All the best, right? I want to serve your highest good. I want to serve my highest good. I am setting a boundary. And the thing is, Eleanor, you know this, and a lot of your founders know this, but the fear creeps up. When you teach people how to value you, that is how you sort out the clients that are meant for you from the clients that are not meant for you. The people who work with me understand my boundaries, they cherish my boundaries, and they protect their own. If we set a 30-minute call, we are hanging up after that 30 minutes because they have other things to do and I have other things to do. Boundaries, I've heard it said, are how you love yourself and how you love others. That was the number one thing I negotiated for last year. Number two is space. So you can't see me here on this podcast, but I want you to imagine that you are in a beautifully decorated home office and that behind me, there are these beautiful lucite bookshelves that have only books written by women. Eleanor, I am sitting in what I call the she suite. This used to be, okay,
It was a bedroom. I can remember the first time I interviewed you. It was a bedroom then.
It was a bedroom. And I remember somebody saying to me, Alex, you know, your bed is visible in the background. Can we talk about what kind of
bed? This is a spare bed, by the way. P.S.
Right, spare bed. But you know, what sort of message is this sending? And it was interesting because when the person said that to me, I thought initially they were making a joke about the bed being visible. And they said, no, what kind of message does that send about the value that you place on your own work? Eleanor, when I tell you, my brain exploded and I thought, oh my gosh, that's right. We have one home office in my home and it's where my husband's fraternity furniture went to die. And so I, Eleanor, negotiated for this office. I have it. My husband's now up in the attic very happily. I completely redecorated it. And I said to the world, my work is worthy of space, taking up space in my home and in the world. It has profoundly shaped how I show up. And the last thing I negotiated for is support. Eleanor, at the beginning of last year, I was doing almost everything in my business myself. People here know when you're listening to this podcast, the first hire is the most difficult because that's the first step where you say, my work is valuable. I can't do it all. I'm going to level up and do the most important things. I now have a massive team. They do almost everything in my business except show up for the indispensable stuff. They do everything else so that I can rest, be with my family, make strategic decisions, write and create, and then I can show up for the biggest ticket items that we have. That is now what I have. I have support in the home, Eleanor, with meals, with organization, with things for my family, and I have support in my business, and I'm done apologizing for it. Every single woman should have this. And I have to tell you that, it's really changed my view on what it is that's most important for us to be negotiating. Without support, I simply couldn't do any of what I need to do.
What did you need to ask of yourself? What changes did you need to ask of yourself to be able to accept that level of support where you show up for the indispensables, like a conversation like this?
Okay.
That becomes a key role for you, because we hear it all the time. We're told that this is what we need to do, but it's not easy to do it, right? Or it doesn't feel initially. So I'm so curious, what did you have to ask of yourself?
Okay. So while you were speaking, Eleanor, I was deciding how honest to be on this podcast. And I decided mentally, I'm just going to go for it. I would love to sit here and say to you that I internally, without prompting, without therapy, came up and said, Alex, you really deserve this support and you should go for it. Instead, here's what happened, Eleanor. This is, I think, going to resonate for the women listening to this. I really backed myself up against the wall. I got to a place where I felt so stressed and bogged down in minutia, in things that were not making me happier, not moving the needle for me. And too often, I'm working on this still, we get to a place where we just can't take it anymore before we get the help. And so here's what the process was for me. I initially started with a part-time executive assistant. Together with a friend of mine, we decided that maybe I should get a fractional CFO. So it was step-by-step, Eleanor. First, I had the part-time EA, then I got the CFO. The fractional CFO came in and said, Alex, you're sitting on a massive organic business and you could really put the pedal to the floor. Are you ready to do that? And I said, yes. And she said, do you know what it's going to take? Eleanor, when I tell you, I swear, I thought she was going to say hard work. And I was ready to do that. And she said, no, you need support. You need a personal assistant like yesterday, and you need a full-time executive assistant and more help than that. And even then, Eleanor, I had this voice that came up, and the voice said, who do you think you are? That was the voice. It was this punishing voice that said, you're dreaming too big. You have a big ego. You're really putting yourself out there now. You think you're something important. And the work I had to do, Eleanor, was not to try to shove that voice down, because that doesn't work. It was to look at it, notice it, and say, oh, you're back again. The same voice I heard when I was writing a book proposal. And the voice said, who do you think you are? And as it turns out, Eleanor, I'm a best-selling author who got a big book deal from Simon & Schuster. That's who I am. And so yet again, I noticed this voice coming up and I said, oh, there you are. I'm leveling up. You're right on time. And you can sit here, but just know I'm going to plow ahead. And so it was piece by piece, and every hire I made, Eleanor, led me to that next step. And so for the founders out there who think that you have to take some giant leap off a building to build your 7-figure business, that's actually not how it happened for me. I think my risk profile is naturally a little bit more conservative, but I built it brick by brick, person by person. And as soon as I took one step, the next step appeared. And so I've still got big dreams, Eleanor. I'm still looking to substantially level up the impact I'm making. And I know I don't know everything I need to do to get there, but I'm going to take a few steps this year. And I feel confident that once I do, the next level is going to appear.
This idea that you have to see it to be it. And I think what can happen when you don't have that level of support is if you think you need to do it all on your own, then it limits what you see being possible for yourself. And so you only ask for that amount versus getting the support. Now growth isn't exhausting because you don't have to do it all by yourself. Now, I think it opens up what you see as possible and what you see as you're able to now ask for from collaborators, from partners, from clients, from the universe.
Absolutely. You know, Eleanor, a secret, I have a big voice, but I'm 5'1.5". Okay. I am pint-sized. And I feel as though every bit of support I got was like getting up on a step stool. And all of a sudden, I could see a level of things that I couldn't see from where I was before. And so now in my mind, I'm about 6'4" because I have all of this support. I'm seeing all of these new layers. And here's what I want your founders to know. I think sometimes we worry that when we level up, it's going to be all stress and, you know, all additional pressure and all that. Don't get me wrong. I'm an expert, Olympic level expert at putting pressure on myself, but I want people to know it also increases the joy. You know, these days I have a weekly team meeting and I see the women that I am employing now, and I'm enabling them to help support their families. And I see the joy we have as we work together as a team. Why would I deprive them and myself of that? It's me working in my zone of genius and them working in their zones of genius. And the synergy there, yes, it enables us to do more, but it's also more joy. And the support that I now have in my home, I have somebody who helps me be the mom and the partner and the friend I want to be. Somebody who helps me in the midst of everything I'm doing, saying, you know, your daughter has this occasion coming up. What are your thoughts on what you'd like to do for that? And the result being that we can create these intentional moments of joy in my household that I never thought could be possible. So I want people to know that it's more than just money and impact. Truly, my life is such a more satisfying place to be, a happier place to be, since I got the support that I'm just going to go ahead and say it, the support that I deserve, and the support that if you're listening, you deserve this too.
I want to go back to probing question number 2. We're only on probing question number 2, Alex. So probing question number 2 was this. When you go back to you taking a big bet on yourself, so you have this deep rest, in 45 minutes, you map out the outline for what would ultimately become Ask for More, which has gone on to not only be a bestseller, but also the foundation of so many of the teachings that you offer, you know, in the world. So what did that agent see in you? What transferable insight would you offer to the women who are listening to this who want to swing big?
Okay, what did she see in me? So first of all, I worked really hard on having an idea that I knew filled a giant hole in the marketplace. So Eleanor, I often say that our pain gives birth to our power. And the pain point for me was looking at the existing negotiation books and the teachings that were out there and thinking, this simply would not work for me as a professional woman. There's not a lot here I can use. And I bet there are other people like me out there. And if I feel like I have this need that's not being filled, I'm going to bet that there's a giant hole in the marketplace full of other people whose needs are not being met. So the first thing I did was to trust in myself that what I saw as the hole in the market was the hole, and to pitch myself in a way that filled that hole. Nobody's talking about the power of questions out there in negotiation. Nobody's teaching a collaborative approach for high-level service-based businesses, and that's what I'm going to offer. So first, I nailed the pain point and the promise that I was delivering. The second was that I was very intentional on who I pitched. I didn't, imagining that you're the biggest agent in the world, Eleanor, I didn't just write to you and say, you're the #1 agent. I'd like to be represented by you. Here's what I did. I got advice from a woman that to find an agent, what you should do is pick out the book that you most love, that you think might be the most similar to yours, and look in the acknowledgments and see who they thank. This, Eleanor, is how I landed a major agent. So I picked up a book called Difficult Conversations, a wonderful negotiation book that also featured a woman author, Sheila Heen, whom I really respect, flipped open, saw the name of my agent. And so I wrote to her and I said, hello, I saw that you did Difficult Conversations. Here's what I admire about this book. I've taught from it. And here's what this book doesn't do. Here's the hole that is still in the marketplace, and I'm going to fill that hole. And here's the reason why people are going to buy this book from me. Here's the idea. Here's why I'm the right person to be selling this idea. And here's why you in particular should be my partner. That was the email that landed me the deal. And beyond that, when we got on the phone, I think she saw that I had the energy and the drive to sell this idea, that I was not going to be the author who was going to sit back and say, how are you going to sell my book? That I was going to get out there and leverage my network to do everything I could to make this book a bestseller. Because Eleanor, I got to tell you, the bestseller list, there's a lot about that doesn't say that much about the quality of a book. But being a woman in a male-dominated field, I was determined that Ask for More was going to go out there and show the world that women can write powerful, mainstream negotiation books that are well received by a business audience. And I told them I was going to do it, and I delivered on it.
Fascinating. I love that whole experience and what you shared and what you're able to pull out that's so powerful for others. Here's another question that I have about the book. So as I have observed the success of the book, seeing you launch it during COVID, see interviews that probably should have been live be over Zoom, just that entire experience. I have been so wholly unsurprised at the success and at the way that the book has picked up, and at which people have really flocked to you and your message. So of course there's all of those things that the agent talked about, that drive to be able to go and do it. But what I have observed that I think is so powerful is the lovely way in which you build relationships and leverage those relationships. And for so many of us, our networks can become a lazy asset. So it's this thing that we have, but we never actually leverage it to create value. And this is, I think, a really important way in which you have asked for more, and which we can apply the lessons from Ask for More to not simply negotiating for money, which is super important, but also negotiating for success in broader terms. So could you kind of walk us through an example of how you have leveraged your network to create value, using some of those principles from Ask for More?
Absolutely. So my approach has always been on the relationship and not the deal. I know that the relationship creates the deal and not the other way around. It's not as though, Eleanor, you and I are going to shake hands, get into something, and then later on, perhaps we're going to grow a relationship. The relationship comes first. And for me, I think over a period of years, without realizing it, Eleanor, I was investing deeply into a number of relationships. And the relationships I form, Eleanor, with the clients I have and the people I do business with, they're not superficial. I honestly think most of the secret is I work with clients I really like. I'm pretty selective. I work with people whose values accord with mine, whose approach to life I want to emulate, who I have fun with, who I enjoy connecting with. And the thing about those relationships is it's not just me calling them up to say, hey, Eleanor, we worked together last year. I have this new thing. It's a perfect match for you. Let's jump on and talk. There is some of that, but it's also knowing how your kids are doing in school, or if you have a wedding anniversary coming up, or maybe you're embarking on an IVF cycle. And if I could tell a personal story, I'm sitting here today having lost my father exactly 1 week ago. And my house is filled with flowers and with cards and notices of donations. And a lot of those are from my clients. They're from people that I do business with, but more than that, we are deeply connected. They're people I can't wait to hug again. They're people who know what's going on in my life, who care about me sincerely, and I care about them. And some of those flowers are even from my father's clients. My father was an attorney. And so when I think about my network, I'm not thinking about a computer chip. I'm thinking of a web of deep relationships where we have trust, we know each other, we see each other, we amplify each other and recommend each other for things and connect them with other people. And so it's an indispensable part of my life. Yes, those relationships are there such that I publish a book in a pandemic and I'm able to call up these powerful women and say, when can you have me in to speak? How many books can you buy? Who else can you call? But it's also about being there for each other on a deeper level that doesn't just mean impact. It means the kind of richness in your life that I truly wish for every female founder.
One of the big issues that so many founders have, and we talked about it off the top, is this idea of time.
Mhm.
And sometimes investing in relationships that you can then leverage, when the deal comes out of the relationship, that can feel like an investment of an asset that you don't have,
Mhm.
i.e. time. What practices do you have in place that have allowed you to build up this web of very authentic relationships?
That's a great question. So number one, if you are sitting here thinking, I don't have time, this is a neon sign flashing at you that you need more support. Okay, so I want you to see that sign in front of you. If you don't have time for relationships, which are the lifeblood, it's like oxygen to your company, but it's also like oxygen to human beings. We need relationships. And if you don't have time, I want you to start thinking of one step you could take to get the support you need to do this. The other thing is, Eleanor, that I think sometimes we think we need to spend an hour on the phone with someone every single time in order to have a relationship. Just last week, I was on the phone with a friend of mine, also a client, very powerful woman. This woman has a massive book of business that is almost entirely due to her network. And do you know what she does, Eleanor? She walks her dog, particularly on Fridays. She'll take a nice long walk with the dog, and she'll make a series of 10-minute calls to people in her network while she walks the dog. It's her ritual. She really enjoys it. And you know who she's calling? She's calling people she likes. So yes, they're talking about business, but they're also catching up. It's fun for her. And so I would say it doesn't have to be a gigantic production. It can honestly be, while you're doing something else, a small incremental investment of time. Over time, those 10-minute phone calls on the walk with her dog have made her millions of dollars, millions. And her dog is well exercised, right? So it's a
And
win
so,
for
as
everybody.
is she. That's right.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up, a powerful, powerful conversation. And I should acknowledge too, that when you don't have the support, that's another place where you can ask for more, and you can use some of these tools to negotiate the money that you need to hire the support. Businesses need cash to grow. Cash is the fuel. It fuels everything, and so that it becomes this kind of loop, right? So really good stuff. Where can people go to get more about you and your work?
Absolutely. So people can find me on my website, which is alexcarterasks.com. There's more about speaking, about training, about the different services and courses I offer. And you can also there get on my weekly newsletter, which is one of the favorite places I have, like you, to really talk to people on a deep level about what I'm going through, what I'm seeing that week, and to be in conversation with you. I am also daily on Instagram and LinkedIn, as well as Twitter and some other platforms.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I so appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.